Well, hi, everybody. Larry Wilson here. Thank you very much for attending or for coming back. This is our fourth expert panel webinar in North America, and we have had thousands and thousands of people attending, lots of feedback, lots of good feedback, and lots of questions. So thanks very much, everybody. Just a little background for those of you who are attending the first time. The original idea for this expert panel webinar series started back in January, and I thought that people would be interested in theory, in reality rather, versus just theory. So to hear from what we thought were leading companies, leading safety professionals about persistent and problematic issues, like what leading indicators do you believe are reliable? What do you believe are reliable enough to change course or change the course of the ship? But what are you really doing versus theory? Should you have a policy or a mission like zero harm or not? And you can listen to people philosophically argue about this at a conference for quite a bit of time, but somebody has to make a decision. So that's what I thought the audience would really like to hear. Things about, is leadership really what it's all about? Felt leadership. So that was the original idea for this series, everybody. But then when the COVID crisis hit, obviously people want to know, well, what are these leading companies doing with COVID? So the very first one we did was sort of coping with COVID. This was about 5 weeks ago, and what are companies really doing now? The next one, 2 weeks later, was the Great Return, because most of us thought it was going to be August, September going back, but it was much quicker. So we got to hear from the leading companies about how they were managing the return that was happening much quicker. The last one a couple of weeks ago was we've been doing a lot of training remotely. Some people even taking on behavioral training remotely, things that were typically always considered had to be done in person. And certainly there was some opportunities there. And so this time here, we're talking about sticky behaviors and dealing with denial. In other words, we've seen some good stuff with COVID. We've even heard some things about near miss reporting going up, injuries actually coming down during this period. So obviously those are things that all of us would like to see stick around. And then there's just the whole denial issue that we'll get to in the second part of this, especially if the community around your work site is not that concerned. And there isn't a great deal of social distancing being practiced in the community. Obviously, that makes things much, much more challenging. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, as well as some questions from the audience. But just before we begin, just let me introduce our panel, if I could. We have once again back with us Anthony Panat. Oh, I don't believe it, Anthony. I did it again, and I didn't do this on purpose. Anthony Panapinto from Procter & Gamble. And I really, ladies and gentlemen, I've super enjoyed the time I've spent talking online and offline with Anthony. He's been through 6 pandemics with Procter & Gamble. This is his 7th. And his background is definitely in pandemics. Also has a PhD in law, but try not to hold that against him. He's a really nice guy, actually, and funny too. So I don't know how you get all of that and with a PhD in law, Anthony. But again, thanks so much for joining us. And David Bianco from Epiroc, and David has also been with us on the expert panels in Europe as well. And David, you're with the corporate health, safety, environment function with Epiroc. It's a Swedish company, so it's not really a part of our topic today. But when I get to ask you a few questions, maybe you could just tell us a bit about your take on Sweden as well, too. I'm hearing a bit on the news saying, maybe we didn't do it right, but you're obviously getting to talk to those folks regularly. Just like I said, it's just interest. And we also have Don Wilson. Don Don's my brother. He's been with SafeStart basically for forever. And Tag had to be on a conference call internationally with 100 some odd folks today around the globe. So Don's been on a few of the focus group meetings with Tag, 60, 70 companies, I think, Don, something like this. And we also got to talk to Tag extensively last night about the focus group meeting. So hopefully Don can kind of comment a bit on the general community out there. And I can't see it on my screen, so I'm a little concerned. Did we lose Ed? Are you still there, Ed? Is he coming back? Don't know if he is. Okay, so we'll just see. I know we were also supposed to have Jessica from Cargill. She was with the Latin America webinar, expert panel webinar, and she was kind enough to say she could join us, but I don't know if her internet connection's working today or not. So, Anthony, let me, if I can, just start with you though, and hopefully some of the other folks will be able to connect with us. But what good things have you seen as a result of COVID, Anthony, and in particular, just at P&G, anything specifically that you're doing to kind of make sure that things don't go away? And everybody, just for a little background, with any behavior, if you want the behavior to continue, it needs to be reinforced. If there is no reinforcement, eventually it goes to what they call extinction, right? So, if you've got something good, but you're not reinforcing it, it has to have its own inherent reinforcement, or likely it will go to extinction. So with that little bit of behavioral background, Anthony, take it away and just sort of tell us what's good at P&G and what are you going to do to make sure it sticks around?
Yeah, so let me give a little bit of context. So, this all began for us in early January, really as a rescue mission, getting people back to their home cities. We were quickly realized that we were considered essential because of our healthcare businesses, our consumer home businesses, our cleaning businesses. So really, other than disruption in China, we've been mostly up and running during this period. So in February, we activated protocols, we acquired protective equipment, and also, community protective equipment in the way of face masks, and really put a bunch of protocols in place. So, what we gave to people, I think that was good, was a structure, an order, and a predictability in light of all the infodemic, all the confusion outside. I've said this before on previous calls. Health and the most important thing that health and safety and environmental professionals have done during this is be that source of communication, that source of rational thinking, because if people have clarity and order and protocols in place, and they understand why those are in place, those are going to be triggers for them to do the right thing. And so we have great confidence, and leadership stepped in, and everybody had to go through this equally. It wasn't the guys in the machine shop wear a respirator and the guys over here don't. Everybody had to follow these protocols, from leadership to engineers to business people to the workers on the factory floors. And we're trying to recreate that as we bring our offices back to open. So I think some really great things that came out of it. We've seen a relative flattening of any of our injury and rates. We've had, with increased business. So you've all heard about our challenges in supplying you all with toilet paper. We managed to produce more toilet paper and didn't see a sharp increase in injuries. And toilet paper, I have learned, is an essential item during a pandemic. I didn't know that, but I've learned that through this period. And so I think those are all really positives that we can take forward in terms of communication and learning, and again, providing people with triggers that are clear, concise. And when you have predictability and order in a time that's chaotic, I think it gives people something to hold on to. What I worry about is what's happening in public. because this is a 24/7 thing. We've done everything we possibly can with our protocols and temperature screening and training and mask wearing, hand hygiene, ventilation, barriers. We put all these precautions that essentially eliminate the virus from coming in, and if somebody does make it in, reducing the likelihood of transmission. But what happens when they go into the community? So the message that I continue to send to leadership, to the factory floor, biology dictates whether we all get immunity. We don't know that. Seasonality indicates whether, what we're going to see in terms of trends. Vaccines are out there. Point of service tests are going to be really important, but we don't have one of those today like we do for influenza. We don't control any of that, but what we continue to tell people that they can control in their mind and with vigilance, so keeping their mind on the task, is we dictate compliance with our new habits. We stay away from people. We decide who we're going to socialize with outside of work, where we're going to go, adherence to social distancing, adherence to mask wearing, all those things that we know can help mitigate and reduce transmission of this disease. And it really is, people, I've read the, 60 articles about mask performance. And so you have some authors out there who looked at the same topics that I did.
That must have been a lot of fun, Anthony. That must have been really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking at David here. He's like, we know each other. It's good, boy. Oh boy, I wish that was my job. 60 articles on masks. What did you say the last time? 240,000 pieces of information you had sifted through for Procter & Gamble over the last 3 or 4 weeks, Anthony? It's mind-boggling number just to make sure people are getting good information. That would be something that I would really love to see endure. Would be, I don't know, just like people like yourselves and David, I could, fact check, like what is reality, and being able to provide reality to your workforce like that. I think that'd be a phenomenal thing to keep going. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but carry on.
No, that's fine. And I mean, that's the value that I think we bring as health, safety, and environmental professionals, gathering the right data on exposure, making it relevant to why we're doing risk mitigation steps that we're doing, and keep that in front of people in a healthy way. And then, what's been interesting is as I do my contacts with the sites, we have 127 sites around the world. Initially it was, are these masks safe? Are our workplaces safe? Now I'm seeing this transition as things open back up to, I'm getting questions. I have a cruise scheduled in the fall. Should I go or not? Do you think the cruise lines are going to run? I want to get back to hot yoga. When can I go to hot yoga? So it's been an interesting transition. And my advice right now is, given the cases in Korea of the 110 people that were infected by their fitness instructor over 12 Zumba classes, I would advise that you probably don't want to go yell and scream and dance in a small room with some folks at this time. So just some perspective on that. But again, I think the positive has been the communication from top to bottom and bottom to top, and really getting people into those habits. And we're really doing a lot to try and keep people thinking about those triggers about transmission of this virus.
Well, I was just about to get back into my my hot yoga and my Zumba. Actually, that was so. I'll hold off for a bit. Anthony, thanks so much. David, like I said before, last time. Oh, by the way, everybody, Ed did tell us he lives in Florida, and he told us there was a huge storm. So I have a feeling Ed may be dealing with this storm. Nevertheless, we'll carry on. David, last time you said something that, well, I actually changed the program that we're making on, certs and COVID and complacency drift to talk about the surface level and also the deeper level as well too. And I thought that was really apropos. I was in a couple days ago in a store that had all of the appropriate markings for the customers, 2 meters apart, the only so many people in the store at the same time. And while I was in there, the sympathy protest for Black Lives Matter went down the center of Whistler Village, and I was just disappointed to see that they weren't 6 feet apart, and they're all yelling, like you said, Anthony. So that's sort of like the Zumba thing. You should probably be 10 or 15 feet apart if everybody's marching and yelling. And then they got up on stage and they want the press and the cameras to see their signs and everything, but now they're not 6 feet apart and they're not wearing masks. So, that's got to be very difficult to try to manage the protocols, and then also to deal with that kind of stuff in the community. And you're in Dallas down there, so that's definitely in the communities that are protesting and stuff down as well too. So maybe if you could, David, just talk a bit about the good things that you've seen at Epicor and what specifically you're doing to keep them going. And then you can talk a bit about some of the, like Anthony, a bit about some of the trials and tribulations you're struggling, or challenges, I guess I shouldn't say struggles.
Okay, great. Thanks, Larry. The only thing tougher than Anthony's last name is saying Epiroc instead of Epicor. So.
Oh, did I do it again? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Every other
David,
time.
you should wear a shirt that has it on it or something.
It is.
Yeah.
I wear it every time. I wear it every time.
Well, and everybody, the people listening wouldn't know that they changed the name. Only I haven't changed it in my head yet.
That's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. That's all right. I just, for branding purposes, want to be accurate. I don't want to get sued by Epicor, whoever they are.
Well, it's late. It's late in Sweden. I've got a good chance that Corinne might not be listening to me right now. And I'll be all right the next time I walk into her office. Oh goodness. Anyway.
This is aside from the stock market, this is the only roller coaster that's operating in the United States right now. The COVID crisis. It's
my goodness.
It's all over, up and down, and all over the place. And so people's perspectives are very dynamic. Like I told you back on that call, in the EU call, the first one, about people's what they say on the surface and then what they really feel about it. I still think that's true, but I think it's very dynamic because the information is coming at them in so many ways. What I find very interesting now, the last 2 days, I've spent time on having to do some contact tracing because of some people that have come back to the office, and then they've had events in their lives that have had potential exposure, and then they've had exposure in our facilities. So that's a new dynamic, but it shows that when you start to bring people back, your risks really start to exponentiate potentially. And you get to a scenario where you could literally wipe out a whole department at a minimum, and so these are sobering thoughts. I mean, I think the reality of that kind of scenario that we're in now is it's really made me kind of just stop and say, wait a minute, bringing people back, we can do that, but do we need to do that? We wanted to say if there's a business need, because the more people we bring in, the more interactions there are. So it really takes some calibration on your perspective to really see this thing not only from the physical and emotional side, but from the practical side, and then to recognize that when these decisions are made, I mean, the guys that were involved in the first contact trace were following protocols to the T, but not everybody that was around them were following it to a T. And so, as soon as you get some leakage in that, especially when you're handling common equipment, if you're handling computer equipment that's common or factory equipment that's common, that's where you really, start to run the risk. And so if you're not prepared to recognize that, those kind of scenarios as they become physical as opposed to virtual support, you start to open up Pandora's box, so to speak. And I think that's really the quell note for me this week, which I didn't really have quite as strong of a realization about until I actually had to go through the process.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, you tell me about it yesterday. It's like the better part of your day, right? The one contact tracing. So that was a bit of a unfortunate revelation. I thought certainly one of the things that everybody, just almost universal acceptance, would be that doing more video calls versus just regular telephone audio conference calls. And I thought that that would be something that would be a permanent shift, that everybody would say this was much better. Let's do this from now on. I thought so. And then there was a segment on the news last night in Canada, like the national news, about Zoom fatigue and how a number of people were actually incredibly stressed by this. They had to go like lie down and sleep after a Zoom call or whatever. And I'm like, well, see, if you listen to me on a Zoom call, I'll put you to sleep right on the call. See, two for the price of one. But I didn't realize that, even some things that I thought were, almost, matter of, we're going to do that. Not as straightforward. So Don, if you were going to sort of give us the 50,000 or 40,000 foot view from the 70 or 60, 70 companies you and Teg have been working with in the focus group, what good stuff in general have they been reporting, and what are they doing to keep the good stuff, if you will? Or, any sort of consensus out there, or is it all over the place? Or
Yeah, well, sort of in the calls, things about what they're going to do to keep the momentum going, that's been a bit thinner. But in terms of the things that they're saying that the crisis is helping with, they're basically, the safety leaders in our roundtables discussion, they're fairly universal, saying that communication both up and down the chain of command has gotten better, more communication from a frequency standpoint, and better communication. And many of the safety leaders on our roundtables have also reported that key leading indicators, as you were mentioning at the outset of this, like near-miss reporting, have also improved both from a frequency standpoint, that is, people are saying we're getting more of them. Now, the natural question you'd ask me is, well, can you put a percentage to that? And no, it was qualitatively more. And from a quality standpoint, they were basically saying that they were done more thoughtfully and mindfully. So that was one thing. The other thing, as a benefit,
was there any why behind that? Like, just naturally happened, or did they give you a feeling for cause and effect on that? Like, why more were the near misses reported about COVID specifically, and that's why there was an increase?
I think that that's definitely driving the process, because it's new and novel. I'm not trying to make a joke on the name of the virus, but it's a new and novel threat. So,
okay.
Where you're used to the old safety-related threats, and you're used to your environment and it's fairly static, then you may not feel the need to be reporting on near misses. But with the heightened awareness around COVID, you start to use a system that was designed for one thing, for this new thing. You get using the system forms a bit of a habit. You start using it for other things as well. That was the sort of thing that we heard from them. And again, that's from safety leaders who are calling in and participating in these roundtables from companies like David and Anthony's companies. So that was one of the things. The other thing that we're hearing as a positive is that, unlike traditional workplace safety, where leaders aren't facing the same risks and hazards as the shop floor workers, the threat of the virus is universal and is 24/7. I think, Anthony, you were talking about that. It's, so senior leaders, where I think, Larry, in our history, we've heard about the challenges that somebody from, the financial side of the business is going to have walking out onto a shop floor with a grumpy old millwright and talking about the importance of lockout tagout procedures, or the millwright's going to look back at them and go, I don't believe you've ever done this.
Mm-hmm.
Senior leaders can now talk from a firsthand experience standpoint, and this is humanizing them. And exactly like the story you just told about the protesters, you know, we're hearing they're also communicating more through relating stories about what they've seen. You know, exactly. You think, you know, like before I came into work today on my, you know, commute through downtown, I saw a group of teens who weren't social distancing, and that made me think more about social distancing when I got to work. But it's that story, that relatable, because it's 24/7. So that was a positive, that the communication was better, and that leaders were seen as more human. Those are a couple of the things. If you want to go on with the rest of it, I can cover more later if you'd like to.
Sure. Okay. Well, no, thanks, Don. And well, Anthony, like I was saying before, I think people do tend to respond, hopefully well. I think the majority well in a crisis, especially leaders. But as I said before, things go to extinction as well too. So when when the dust settles, I guess everybody'd like to know the answer to that question right off the bat. We could end the broadcast right there if you could just tell us that part, I guess, Anthony. But when the dust settles, is there anything that you guys are doing or that you could recommend to people that would keep the leaders communicating well and frequently like they're doing now? Because my feeling is that when things go back to normal, they will too, and that'll go back to previous levels. But there's no reason it has to if it was reinforced. So I don't know anything you guys are doing around that, or like, have you actually had your senior leadership group going, hey guys, we got the ball rolling. It's a lot easier to keep it rolling. Let's not let it stop. Or has there anything official or any, I don't know, like just to make sure it happens, I guess.
Yeah, so I think, in particular with COVID, we continue to coach leadership that this will not be the last pandemic. We've had a whole bunch of them before. This is by far the most significant one in terms of just the information and the speed at which it went around the world and universality of its infectivity, traveling to many, many continents very quickly, if you think about 2 months or so. Where we are right now is we're talking about de-escalation of all the layers of protection that we put in place to a minimum of where would we stop and say, this is the minimum that we're going to recommend and advise you to continue in terms of behaviors, not only through this next flu season, or not only through the vaccine, when we have a vaccine for this, presuming we get a vaccine, but also in the future, so that we become resilient from these types of black swan events, because they will happen again. And so that's one context. And again, hopefully what we can do is find ways to demonstrate. And so one of the things I've communicated is, look, the structure and the order that we've provided universally for people when they come to work. They know they're going to get their temperature taken. They know they're going to get a survey about their symptoms and their contacts outside of work. They get in and they, mask wearing and hand hygiene and separation into, contact tracing islands, if you will. So all that stuff, we can ratchet back some of those, but we need to continue with that, find ways to bring order, predictability, and the importance of order and predictability to other safety items that we take for granted. So I continue to ask, why COVID and why not machine safety, or why COVID and material handling safety? What's different about them? Because certainly people get hit by fork trucks. So, and we're looking at how technology can help too, because I think if anything, this encourages people to think outside the box. So how do I do remote assistance so people aren't getting on aircraft and bringing the virus back home? How do I do remote training? One of our difficult issues in EH&S here is we do 52 live schools around the world a year. Well, we're not going to be doing that, so how do we keep that up? And then I think the other thing is just remote assistance, which we've really learned how to do well in this period. everybody, whether you're a leader of a finance organization. I hated Teams in December. I'm the biggest advocate of it now because I've been able to answer 75 questions a day in real time. What about this mask, or what about building a barrier, or what about shutting off my ventilation or opening the windows? Everything that's been heard in the news media has been able to come to me in seconds and have me respond in a database way to people. So I think those are all critical learnings. And I think this is a real opportunity for HS&E professionals to really push that technology envelope in a different way to mitigate hazard, give workers better line of sight, and also compel leaders to continue, with the same zest and energy they have on COVID, on items that may not be quite as, I hate to use the term sexy, but whether it's mobile material, handling equipment, fall protection, whatever the hazards might be in the workplace.
Well, yeah, I know, and it's always dicey to use. Like, I remember when I was in France, when they said, something isn't sexy, it didn't have actually a sexy connotation. It was much more like it's not fashionable, it's not cool, right? As opposed to necessarily voluptuous or something like that. But Anthony, you mentioned something to me before, from moving into the second question about denial. And pardon me, everybody, if I'm forgetting whether it was before the broadcast or if you've mentioned it afterwards, Anthony, but that your concern was a few weeks from now, like there's this second wave coming. You predicted that. So, and I believe this as well too, just from talking to you, that if the people don't practice the social distancing, and if they don't adhere to the personal, all the things that we all know to do, but if that doesn't happen, it's a given. You certainly convinced me of that. I don't think you convinced the rest of the world, Anthony, though. That seems to be the issue here. So you're 14 days, 21 days. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I got that right. But carry on.
Yeah, if we look at the typical incubation period, median of 5, call it 4 to 7, and the length of the illness when you remain infective, call it 14 to 21 days. That's a pretty broad period where you can infect other people, and some people are going to have mild symptoms, and some people are going to have no symptoms at all. My point is we've never really been steeply down anywhere in the globe other than China. They went from high to zero, which is a fascinating curve on an epidemiological perspective. But everywhere else in the world is pretty much flat to bouncing. I would expect what I'm communicating in my leadership, I'm looking at the data on a 3-day and 7-day moving average for hospitalizations and cases. Not perfect data, but guiding. And, we're still seeing a bit of a bounce. So in the U.S., for me, Georgia's been open a couple of weeks. They're back on their way up, and they bounce on that, on numbers of cases and numbers of hospitalizations. This is going to be regional or local, but the message that I send is, look, you need to be looking outside at what your town, what your county, what your vicinity is, and making choices outside of work about relevant contacts. You have your family that where they've been. You have your neighbors where you think where they've been, and then you've got the guy in the next subdivision who may be out at bars every night, kissing everybody in the bar, and maybe you shouldn't hang out with that person right now until the virus is gone. So I think we're going to see, my prediction is bumps over the course of the summer, certainly concerning to me, and I was sickened by what happened, with the police officer, George Floyd. I think it's horrible, but my big concern for the protesters themselves is they're doing things that are contrary to ridding the big cities of this virus. And so how do we keep everybody safe and get everybody into a certain level of control, open the economy back up, but do it really in a smart way? And from a workplace safety professional, It's how do I coach and counsel the people that are going to bring the virus into the workplace to eliminate it from both their families and the workplace by just being really conscientious. What are those triggers when I'm out in public that would lead me to say I'm at risk of getting exposed to this virus?
So really, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, David, but the real challenge, Anthony, then is to get your people to the deeper level, like so that they are like, you can't begin to control them off the job, right? So they're and their level, like what I've learned just listening to you is that as vigilant as I have tried to be, and I'm Johnny SafeStart too. I'm making mistakes. I'm not self-triggering fast enough here and there. I'm forgetting some. Gosh, I can even hear Jack. For those of you who don't know, Jack was, Larry, man, you write about this stuff. You got to do it all the time. And I'm just struggling with the mistakes. You know, the having the wipes. I almost got backup wipes for the wipes now because I forgot the wipes. You know, just so that, you know, I've got them if I want them in case there's something I think I touched, whatever. Even if you're totally on board, what I'm getting at is this is a struggle, right? And you know, one of the things I hope by using your story in the program is to say, listen, here's somebody who's been through 6 pandemics. It's his 7th. He's an expert. He's still a person, and he can still make mistakes in a rush or combine a couple of those things, right? But when you're not even making the effort, I think it's a given that the pandemic is going to bounce back again. And so that's sort of what I saw, was that you're obviously socially conscious, but you're not, you know, I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't be further apart here. That you can do this. We can work and live with COVID, but we all have to be like, just like you drive and stay 6 feet away from somebody, unless, well, I don't say you're in India or you're in China. You don't get that much distance, but you know what I mean. Like we naturally do it. Nobody needs to tell us. But I'm not seeing the cultural majority motivating John Q. public guy. Like I see it the other way right now, going there's no social pressure one way or another to practice social distancing. At least it seems to me. David, what's your feeling about that? Outside of your workplace, how much of a struggle is or how much differential is there that you'll have to deal with in terms of getting to that deeper level with your people?
Well, it's, you know, as I live in Texas, and so there's been an open plan to open, and it's been incrementally progressing. And I think that, you know, from the places that I've gone to that have been allowed to open, they have done a fabulous job of spacing tables. All of the help is properly PPE'd, you know, wiping off doors coming in. And I mean, they've been doing a great job. So I think there has been a level of incremental social responsibility adjustment to get used to this, to buy into it. The problem is this situation we've had in the U.S. and now is spreading with the protests, unfortunately, is the perfect storm of people who have been cooped up for months, and they now have something that they're passionate about, and they can release that passion. And that passion is so strong that it is now the driver, and all the other things that they were starting to learn, agree to, and understand have just evaporated overnight, literally overnight. And again, I brought that up about the media. The media they're not talking about COVID anymore. They're not talking, all you hear is one theme. And I've talked to people in England 2 hours ago. I talked to people in Sweden 3 hours ago, and their media in Australia, they're all full with the same things. It's as if COVID never happened. And so all I'm saying is, you know, I learned a long time, you know, you get what you ask for, right? So it's kind of like this is the worst thing that could have happened on top of this, because we know epicenters like nursing homes, large cities, families. I think Italy was hit very hard because those families live together. They have multi-generations living together. They hug and they kiss all the time. They go to the store. It's the perfect storm for a virus. I believe their cultural life, which is a wonderful life,
Yeah.
actually hurt them in this scenario. And I think in South America, you're going to start to see that more too. So it's kind of like our worst demons have come together now and created this perfect storm. And I feel like in the last 10 days that we're swimming against the stream worse than ever. I knew it was a struggle before because it was getting people to develop new habits. Now it's Katie bar the door, the old stuff's out the window, throw the baby out with the bathwater, whatever you want to say. It's lost. And if something or someone doesn't snap this back to what's really going to happen, yeah, we're going to see numbers go up. And it isn't going to be just because we opened up a little bit. It's because we've congregated to a degree that it's making the most vulnerable people, who are the people who aren't working and have time to do that kind of activity, put themselves in harm's way for a cause that's important but not worth their life.
Yeah, well, I mean, see, the thing is, it's other people's lives too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, it's a bit like the old smoking thing. You've got a right to smoke, yeah, but you don't have a right to make me smoke or Anthony smoke. That, you know, and if we're in the same room, we're smoking, right? So that's part of it, is that you can't, you like, and I've said in the thing, with safety, quite often also you have your excuse or your rationale for not speaking up and saying something to a coworker is they're only going to hurt themselves. If they don't want to wear a face shield at the grinding wheel, it's their face or it's their nose or their teeth. It's not me, right? But you can't really say that with COVID because it is you, or it could be your family, right? You know, so it is everybody's business. Now, how you go about minding your own business is the difference between whether people listen to you or whether you make problems worse, right? So, you know, there's a huge amount of skill required to intervene, even with something like COVID. I think people need to know right way, wrong way, for sure. But it is changing quickly, David, for sure. So Don, I don't know, how much the last few days have weighed into the discussions with the focus groups in terms of the difficult, like I agree with you, David. I think everybody was doing fine. The workplaces were getting their protocols and their social distancing. The community was. I think there was, great improvement, but all of it set back dramatically by the huge congregations of people. And then every one of those people, everybody that they know or potentially could come in contact with too, right? So you've got an almost instant family multiplier from everybody that was too close together at these protests. Anyhow, Don, is that on the radar screen yet with the focus group, that there's even more of a community issue or to deal with, that they've got to step up their communications, double it, triple it? I don't know what that would be like exactly, but are they doing anything out there to deal with the most current part of the crisis?
So in terms of what we're hearing, echoing what David was saying, we've got this new shiny object. I'm sorry, and I know that's an insensitive way of saying it, but this other crisis, the passion that's actually, it is
better than squirrel.
Well, okay, so it's the squirrel.
Yeah.
It definitely is that. And, going back to, sort of the old behavioral psychology about COVID, the weight of consequences, maybe I'll get COVID, maybe I won't. So it's later, it's uncertain, and it's negative, and that's not the biggest influence you can have on people. That's the worst influence you can have on people in terms of changing what they do. Here you've got this other thing that's coming along, and you do have, as I was talking about in preparation for the call last night, Larry, with you and Teg, the what people have decided that they're going to be focused on in terms of an immediate fear or an immediate concern or the passion that David was talking about, that's what the media is going to reflect back, because the media has to sell advertising.
Right,
So,
yeah.
So as soon as that happens, the message changes to what people themselves want to be concerned with, and that's the kind of thing we're seeing. In terms of recommitting with senior leaders, I think if those folks actually have more input or more ability to drive the conversation, even if they want to focus on these new things, I think Anthony was saying, coaching leadership that these crises is going to keep coming. That you said, Anthony, these crises will keep coming, but this crisis will keep coming. It's not just the next one, and that they need to step back and be the grown-ups in the room, I guess, around what the conversation will be in the organizations. This is the biggest risk. This is what we need to keep focusing on.
Okay, yeah.
And what I do is really try to make it real for people. So every week I outline case studies and transmission of the virus that are relevant to the workplace. So the Zumba example is a great example. One instructor infected 110 people in just 12 Zumba classes that had on average 22 people per class. So roughly a 50% infection rate. So imagine you come into a fairly small workplace infected, you can do a pretty significant job. The other thing I remind people is, and again, this goes to my industrial hygiene roots, it's a source receiver pathway model. So the source of exposure to the chemical hazard, does the receiver come to it, or does it go to the receiver through some pathway? And I said, think of this virus as, mobile point sources. So imagine in that crowd of protesters, I put robotic drums of benzene, and I just willy-nilly have them migrate around the crowd and expose people to benzene. That's effectively what people in those crowds are doing to one another. It's just that we don't know who is the exposure source and who is not. And so just trying to bring those conversations down to a real level for people in an objective sort of way, I think goes a long way to having those types of discussions.
Well, yeah, I think so. And Don, I know we talked about this this last night, and I don't know, as far as a hint for leaders and communication. And he's certainly not known as a humanitarian, Stalin. No, but you had a little anecdote that you shared, I think, last night with David and I, or I can't remember, about
Sure. I'm the one who gets
how to effectively communicate to people about things like this, like for senior leaders. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm the one who gets to quote Stalin live, so that'll be their last remembrance of what I said on air. Sorry, and whether or not it's the same thing as quotes that are attributed to Churchill. If it's a good quote, people say it's Churchill. If it's a bad quote, people say it's Stalin. But it was basically about battlefield losses, and the story was that one of the generals had come in to see Stalin and said, we've got 1 million casualties. And Stalin said, that's not the way you communicate about something like this. Like, one man's death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. And as soon as it's large groups of people, it's large numbers. So for leaders, the idea that Anthony was saying was that you make it that one example, that one Zumba class, that one particular thing, or you paint the story about one person. David was talking about doing a contact tracing. Ted was telling us last night, as you might remember, Larry, in the call, that one of the folks of those 70 or so companies that we're having these roundtables, they've lost someone. So it's no longer a series of numbers. It's no longer the ticker tape crawl on the bottom of CNN or Fox News. It's this person has a name, this is what happened, this is their family. And for leaders, just trying to connect the danger to a personal level or what people care about. And one story, one event. And again, they said one good thing Stalin gave us was maybe that, that one, that one little anecdote of just talk about something that can connect at a not a cerebral level, but at an emotional level with people.
Yeah,
That's what you're
exactly.
going for.
Well, and no, I agree, Don. It's like obviously with all of our consultants out there in the field, North America and internationally, I said, guys, safety has a face. Talk about the face, don't talk about the statistics, because that's what we care about. I also like I personally like the little bit of humor, Anthony, as well too, because I think it's sticky. I think people do pass on a kind of a funny thing like that, but just what you were saying about Zumba, for instance, was it's a bit humorous, but as soon as you see it, you go, yeah, this is just a disaster, like waiting to happen. All these people dancing around, breathing hard, close proximity to each other. Yeah, if there's somebody's infected, everybody's going to likely get a good chance of getting it. Ed, as I said, got caught up in the storm, and he told me his internet might go. But from the conversations that I had with Ed about this topic, a couple mundane things or lesser things he mentioned was that personal hygiene has improved since COVID. So the washrooms are cleaner, they smell better, the people are washing their hands more often. He said there aren't fingerprints on the microwave now. The microwave's clean. The inside of the microwave is clean for the first time. You actually feel like using the mic, so he's hoping that a lot of those, just the hygiene and the housekeeping, and I think Ken Tootin from Crown Cork and Seal was also, talking about this, and one of the things that just, people are doing a better job of keeping things and themselves clean. So that's obviously one of the things that they want to see endure. He's also very concerned about the difficulty with the community. If the community isn't practicing social distancing, and what level of ramp up that they will have to do with communication to sort of, to just what you were saying, Anthony, for people to be mature enough to go, even if everybody else isn't, me and my family still have to. Um, are you doing anything to help your folks with that at home, Anthony? Like that seems to me would be a fairly big struggle in terms of the 1 week link, right? I mean, I can't manage. I don't have an airtight system, and I'm trying my hardest. So I'm assuming if you take me back a few years to when I was 5 years old, all the effort in the world is still going to beget a lot more mistakes, and yet any one of those people is just as capable as an adult of infecting somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, what we really try to do is, again, push out from the ground, the individual workers back to their families. I mean, we've provided families with some guidance documents around masks and social distancing. Just really trying to incorporate and carry forth the programs that we have in our workplaces to home. And again, in my weekly roundtables that are open mic dates with all the plants. As I said, I answer work-related and non-work-related questions, such as, I have my cruise planned for the fall. I had one yesterday. Someone came in and said, my kid's going crazy in the house. He just graduated high school. His senior year of high school is ruined. Who should he hang out with and who shouldn't he? And so we try to provide some practical guidance, again, on those things that can be controlled and those things that can't be controlled. If he's going to a tent bar with friends and he's hugging everybody and kissing everybody, that's a different story. But, if you know a little bit about the friends and they live in your neighborhood, and I think it's relatively low risk. So we're trying to give risk a real face in terms of COVID, and really be just a calm presence of what's in the media. So we track what's in the media, we pull the technical data, and we provide a question and answer style response to those questions. So I think that's what we can do, and I think just being that sense of consistency for people will help them. At least those that we have access to will keep them thinking about this, and vigilance is safety in some ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't intend this, everybody, but just a second, and I'll.
Oh, this is embarrassing. Larry has left the building. No, he's back. There he is.
Give a plug to the new coloring book for the Boo Boo Bandits, but should be on the Boo Boo Bandits website, booboobandits.com, in a couple more days. But basically, it's the Ouchbusters versus COVID, and COVID is a female basketball player. She plays for the COVID team. She's number 19. And everybody she passes the basketball to, the basketball is the virus. So we get to show the kids how it goes from, 2 bandits to 4 bandits to 8 bandits to now 8 bandits and 16 kids to 32 to 64 to the whole world, and to try to show everybody how we've got to keep the social distance. Anyhow, if you're all welcome, you're all welcome to it. I don't know if the graduating seniors want to do some more coloring right now, but certainly for the little kids, it's something for them to do, or a way to help talk about the importance of all of this as a family, because it is such a one week linked problem, and it's so innocent. It's not always innocent. Obviously, we saw lots of people who know better not practicing social distancing, but when you start thinking about 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds going to school, there'll be a fair number of innocent mistakes despite all of our best efforts. And so, it's a real challenge for everybody to keep from bringing the virus into the workplace as well too. David, we've got just a couple minutes, so if you could, we had one of the people call question in going, don't forget to get David to talk about Sweden. So what do you hear from the ground level in Sweden? I heard on the news last night maybe we shouldn't have done this, but what are you hearing at the ground level there?
Yeah, I think that has started to bubble up a bit from the government officials with the fatality rate, but right now I guess it's a matter of they are where they are, they've done what they've done, and so they're going to have to see it through. A lot of the people there, the philosophy was for Sweden was to take the best nature of people in the fact that they'll do the right thing. And from the people in Sweden that I know, they're great people, and they are much more focused, I think, when it comes to these kind of things. And
socially responsible.
Responsible, right?
Yes.
And I think to a large extent they did. They got bit by what U.S. and a lot of other places probably got bit by, and that's this whole elderly care nursing home thing. When you look at the numbers, you start taking the numbers apart. That is a huge component. And so as it relates to what they did in the general populace, I still think that they are going to have more people that potentially have some degree of immunity than we might, because we were locked up for 2 months, and so ours is going to have to play out very differently. But generally, they definitely have taken a different approach. They work from home more than we did in general anyway, so that wasn't as big a leap for them, as an example too. So there were some structural things that were different as well, but they definitely had a different reaction and response and approach, and I think it's a reflection more of their culture. And at the end of the day, when we look back, when we look at the numbers at once we've got most everybody tested, they may be in pretty good shape when it all comes down. I personally think that they're not going to experience as much of a hockey stick effect when fall occurs. I think that's what they're not going to experience that other places may very well. So it's just an interesting approach, but the leadership still has taken it very, very seriously, banned international travel very easily, has maintained that, and is taking the impact of that as it affects the business in stride. So they've been very responsible in spite of being in Sweden.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Anthony, you've got operations in South, well, all over the world, really. But you know, how worried are you about South America? What about Brazil in particular? And any advice for folks that have affiliates in Latin America or South America that
Yeah, and Brazil has been a real hot spot, and we have several locations there, and it's been a real struggle to not implement our protocols, but keep our protocols sound. And a significant amount of our contact tracing has actually been in our factories in Brazil. I mean, that's where we've been. That's one of the hottest spots, if you will.
and
I don't hear him.
yeah, I don't know what happened, Anthony. I think your voice just cut out a bit. Let's see if you can talk again. No, with like watching a movie, like watching an old Japanese, the old movies.
Don't let me put words in his mouth, but
Well, we're just about out of time anyhow. But Don, if you could, just
Let me leave with one cautionary tale, Larry, because the last part of this was about complacency and denial.
mhm.
And we were talking with David just before we lost Anthony about Sweden. So, the crisis does drive improvement, which was the first part of what we were talking about. You and I we talked about, better communication up and down and the leaders being more human. And, the second question of today's topic was complacency, denial, and what we don't want to revert to. And one of the stories from Sweden that I heard years back, and it was in one of those business books, I don't remember which one, was about in 1967, overnight, Sweden changed from a country that drove on the left-hand side of the road like Britain and the UK to the right-hand side of the road. And they had to do it overnight. Everyone had to shift, and everyone thought that what was going to happen was there were going to be car wrecks all over the place. And actually, because this was a new thing and it drove attention, traffic accidents dropped significantly by about 30%, if I recall the numbers right. And it lasted for a while. It lasted for about 2 years, but then complacency crept back in. It wasn't new and novel anymore to drive on this side. It was what everyone did, and traffic accidents went back to where they were. So, there's nothing good about the coronavirus, and there's nothing good about the number of people who've died, except for one thing, and that's the additional attention it's brought, or the focus. And again, we've had events like this in the past that have brought focus, but unless people are continually vigilant, unless safety leaders keep on top of this, I think, like the novelty of driving on the other side of the road, keeping your focus, this too will pass. So that's the last thing I wanted to say today in terms of your second question. And anyways, that's enough out of me.
Well, no, but that, Don, I think that was really actually very good, and I think it's a perfect segue into just wrapping this up, which is the next one in 2 weeks is going to be on complacency and COVID. It's not over till it's over, and I think certainly what I've been hearing loud and clear, and it's great also kind of hearing it from you, Anthony, as well, because this isn't your first rodeo. So unfortunately, you've been through a lot of these things, and that is, the virus is the virus. It isn't something that you can wish away or that you can hope for. I mean, you can hope you don't get it, but you can also, like you said, control an awful lot of your own behavior so you don't, or you don't get, and you don't get other people infected. And that second part is the responsibility part that I think is a bit beyond where we're used to in safety, because normally it's like I'll speak up if it's a good friend or if it's somebody I care about, but otherwise the guy's only going to hurt himself or herself, so I'll just mind my own business. And in this case, minding your own business means you actually have to do something, right? But I do believe that this is not over, and it's not going to be over for a while. And then, as you say, Anthony, and there's going to be another one, Larry. Like, it's not like there's not going to be another one. So, you know, if nothing else, let's not forget what we learn each time and have to go relearn it for the next one, because every time lots of people die. Lots of people die. So if you can, everybody, 2 weeks, same, I don't want to say same bad time, same bad channel, but it'll be the same time, 1 o'clock Eastern, 2 weeks, 2 weeks from 2 weeks from today. We'll get a follow-up email out to everybody. Thank you very much for attending. Thanks for sending in the questions and the comments. Sorry about the technical stuff. We tested it with Jessica in Nicaragua, had a lovely conversation with her on the platform, and everything worked. And Ed did tell me that there was a bad storm in Florida, and he said, "You never know if I'll be able to stick with you." But that's the way it goes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David. Good to see you again. Thanks,
Yeah.
Anthony. Good to see you again.
Bye.
Larry, always good to see you.
Take care,
Okay.
guys. See ya. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.